Hey there, welcome back. And if you're new here, it's great to have you join me. Well, this week I'll be focusing on a beginner friendly flip and we'll cover all the steps that you need in order to complete your first furniture transformation. Now, I'll be working on this two drawer filing cabinet, but you can apply this information on just about any piece that you plan to work. I'll be doing a bit of repair work, prepping for new paint, and applying a glaze to the top. Now, I'm going to be using supplies I have on hand to keep the costs low. Do you think that we can give this guy a new chapter in life? Well, the process I use for almost every furniture flip is broken down into 5 parts. First, I clean, then I'm going to repair, paint, which includes any primer. I'll seal the piece and then stage it for sale. Basically, you're just looking for any type of degreaser. I use trisodium phosphate. It's really inexpensive. You mix it with water, spray it on, and wipe it off. While I'm cleaning a piece, I'm also looking at it to see if there's any repairs that I'm going to need to make in the next step. It's a great opportunity just to get into all the little nooks and crannies that you might not have noticed when you pick the piece up. If you're new to furniture flipping, you might be wondering why, as a furniture flipper, we spend so much time cleaning these pieces. And I tell you, the answer of that question is simple. We want the paint to stick to our piece of furniture when we're done. And trust me, from experience, I've learned that if you don't have good prep, the paint will just simply peel off the piece of furniture. And there is nothing more demoralizing than seeing that happen after all the hard work you put in. Well, with the cleaning done, I'm going to go ahead and pull this hardware off. And it is worth noting, you want to paint under where the hardware is as well. And here we can see, which is probably the reason that this piece was given away for free on Facebook Marketplace. The front drawer of this piece is just basically broken. If you're new to furniture flipping, don't let this type of damage intimidate you. You're going to find that most pieces of furniture are put together with one of maybe 2 or 3 different types of styles. They'll have either a mechanical fastener, which could be a nail or brad or screw, or they might be glued in place, and there are different types of glues that may be used. And they may also have these wooden supports, like this has a little wooden dowel that was in there. Now your job as a furniture flipper is just to slowly take it apart, piece by piece, and when you get it broken down, look for the parts that look like they should be put back together. Add some glue in there. I like to use these little spring clamps. They're great for little glue ups like this. And you can put most pieces back together with just a little bit of time and a little bit of confidence. Trust me, you can do this. When I was cleaning the inside of this cabinet, I noticed that the drawer slides were loose. This is what we would call a flat pack piece of furniture. So this would have come in a box and the original owner would have assembled it. So there's no solid wood in this. It's all MDF or medium density fiberboard. And that is notorious for not holding a screw very well. So for this case, I simply removed one screw at a time on these drawer slides, and I moved it over to the next hole that was in the slide. And I just worked my way through, one screw at a time, making sure that the slide still functioned as designed. And that tightened up all of the drawer slides and made it function just like new. My plan for this piece is to paint it. So there's a couple of reasons why I might grab the power sander before I paint. In this particular case, I'm looking just to scuff up the surface of this piece. Give something for the primer to grab a hold of, little grooves, if you will, for a mechanical bond. The other reason I might be sanding is if the finish on the piece is loose and flaking off. I want to get all of that off to give the finish the best possible chance to grab a hold. Now, in places that my power sander wouldn't reach, I simply use hand sandpaper. It is worth noting that you don't need a power sander to do this. You can sand this entire piece with a couple sheets of sandpaper and some time. So don't be intimidated if you don't yet have power tools. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know I'm a big fan of shellac-based primer. It does get a bad rap. I do admit it is difficult to clean brushes. You need to use an ammonia to clean them. But a little insider tip, you actually don't need to clean your brushes after you use them. I simply put my brush and roller in a little bag, and the next time I go to use them, when I dip them back into the shellac, any of the hardness that is cured will simply dissolve away. Now, I've been using this same brush and roller for probably 3 months now, with no issues. Now, the reason I put a primer on this piece is I want to prevent the possibility of any of this old finish bleeding through the paint that I'm going to apply. One of the main benefits of the shellac-based primer is it dries really fast. By the time I get done with this first coat, I'll be able to go back over the entire piece with the second coat. My objective here is to make sure that I can't see any of the previous finish coming through that shellac. It might take 2 coats. In some cases, I've put as many as 3 coats on. Well, now you can see the front drawer original repair has been fixed, and I'm ready to go ahead and reassemble this piece. And again, this is pretty simple. I'm simply using yellow glue, lining the parts back up, and I'll put a couple of screws back into the same holes that were there before to hold everything in place. And after about 25 or 30 minutes, this thing will be rock solid. As a beginner furniture flipper, I would definitely recommend that every time you're in one of those big box stores, you swing by the paint department and look at the mist tint rack. I found this chalk paint for $7. And for the first couple of projects that you work on as a new flipper, don't get hung up on the color of the piece. You need to be practicing the process of flipping furniture. And trust me, the first couple of pieces that you work on, you're going to learn so much, and then you can focus on getting that real beautiful color scheme in place. So a little bit of words on painting your piece. I am using a foam roller to apply this paint, and it's quite simple. My only tip here is really light pressure. If you push down too hard, you're going to end up with little peaks and valleys of paint on your piece. And you might not be able to see them when you're applying it, but when you're done in the right light, you can see these lines. So foam roller works well. I'll just use really light pressure. Now for the top of this piece, I simply went down to my local Michael's craft store and I picked up some chalk paint in a nice beige, almost a bisque color. I'm not sure if it's bisque. I get confused sometimes when we start talking about colors. But in any case, it's kind of an off-white. And I chose that color because I do plan to put an antiquing glaze on the top of this, and this will simply serve as a foundation to that. But before we put the glaze on, if you're using chalk paint, you have to put a polyurethane or some type of top coat on. If you don't put a sealer coat on before the glaze, that glaze will soak right into that chalk paint, and it's almost impossible to work it and get the look that you're looking for. I'm using a foam applicator that's sold by Fusion Mineral Paint. Now, I really like this applicator. It allows me to put on a nice even coat of urethane with no streaks, no brush marks, no bubbles. And it only takes a couple of minutes to do a piece of this size with this applicator. If you don't have one of these foam applicators, not a big deal. Just go ahead and grab a foam brush or a chip brush and make nice even strokes with your urethane top coat, and you're going to get the same result that I get here. It'll just take you a little bit longer. Now I did let that urethane top coat dry up for a couple of hours. Then I grabbed my Rust-Oleum aged glaze. Now with that top coat in place, this glaze is going to sit on top of the piece. It's not going to soak in. So your objective here is simply to get a nice liberal coat on the piece. The direction of your brush strokes really doesn't matter at this point. Just go ahead and get a nice even coat across the entire piece. One thing I will share with you guys is just be careful of splatter. Sometimes I get a little carried away putting this glaze on, and then a few days later I come by and I realize I've painted my wall, my floor, maybe a piece of furniture sitting next to it. So just be a little careful when you're applying this. If this was a larger piece of furniture, I would definitely break this up into smaller pieces. But in this case, it's a pretty small 2-drawer filing cabinet. And this part is really the fun part of glazing. You want to grab a lint-free cloth, and for me, these blue shop towels are lint-free enough for this glazing process. And you're simply going to go ahead and wipe off the glaze that you don't want to be part of the final piece. And this is really a creative, fun process, and there's really no right or wrong way to do this. In fact, I wiped off this glaze and I thought I had it the way I wanted it. And when I came back 15, 20 minutes later, I realized it was a little darker than I was looking for. So I wiped off a little bit more. It's really easy, really creative, and a really fun process. Since this is the artistic portion of this transformation, I don't want to be too directive with how to do this, but from my experience, I found that wiping it along the length of the piece, or if the grain is visible in the direction of the grain, gives it the best look. But there's really no right or wrong way to do this, and you can be as creative and as whimsical as you choose to be with this. After you've got the glaze looking just the way that you want it, go ahead and let that dry overnight. The next day you can apply 1 or maybe 2 coats of the polyurethane top coat, and that will seal that look right in. Before we get to the final reveal, let's go ahead and take a look at where we started with this piece. Here's the top of this file cabinet with the glaze applied and 2 coats of polyurethane. You heard me mention earlier that I'll be donating this piece to a local elementary school, and it'll be used by a special educator to keep their records straight. I'm going to call this flip a success. We've successfully saved a pretty inexpensive piece of furniture from the dump and put it back in circulation. Well, folks, I appreciate you hanging out with me today. And as always, if you've had a good time, and I'm sure you have, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Take care, and we'll see you next time.